These are the Little Orphan Annie strips for the week of October 26th, 1925. Sorry, this first one is a little crooked. The Count de Tour is trying to escape from Annie because she's been secretly following him, so he's trying to jump over a fence to get away from her. He says, "Well, I seem to have eluded that little pest at last." Meanwhile, Annie's looking around, trying to find him. She says, funny where that bird went to. He sure gave us the slip that time." The Count jumps down from the wall, and he lands on Sandy's tail. Annie goes, "Eek!" The Count goes, "What the?" And Sandy goes, "Yow!" Sandy turns around and bites him on the leg, going, "Grrr!" The Count screams, "Oh!" and his hat goes flying off. When he's gone, Annie is laughing to herself. She's saying, "I ought to be ashamed to laugh, but I just can't help it. The way that guy flew. If he'd had a feather duster in his hand, he'd have looked like an eagle." Meanwhile, Sandy's tail is still hurting, and he's giving a very angry look. The next day, Annie is spying on the Count while he's in his room. The Count has his injured leg up on a footstool, and he's not moving. As Annie notes, being a detective isn't such hard work now. Getting his leg chewed up sure made that guy easy to keep an eye on. He hasn't moved for an hour. Inside the room, Mrs. Warbucks talks to the Count. She says, "Oh, Count, I can't tell you how terrible I feel about that vicious brute attacking you yesterday. Why, he might have killed you." She continues, "Of course I shall have that awful mongrel shot at once." The Count says, "Oh, naturally." Annie reacts with horror. She goes, "Shot? My Sandy? Just 'cause you nipped him when he jumped on your tail, they're going to shoot you. Oh, they can't hurt my little puppy. They can't, they can't, they can't." She's crying as she hugs Sandy. The next day, Annie is walking with Sandy inside the house. She says, "Well, nothing's happened so far. Maybe she was just kidding about shooting you. It's a bum thing to joke about, though. We'll just lie low for a spell and see what happens." But then Annie opens a door and overhears a conversation from inside. "After she's asleep, find that cur and dispatch him. Do you understand?" Quite so, madame." Very well, madame." That's clearly Mrs. Warbucks giving orders to servants as two servants exit the room. One says, "Hello, business, Harry, but orders is orders." The other servant says, "I dread to think what will happen when the master hears of this." That night, Annie is in her bed. Sandy is hiding underneath it. She says, "Well, I brought Sandy in here tonight. They won't dare take him right out of my room. Gee, I wish Daddy was home. He ought to be back tomorrow. If I can only keep him from getting Sandy till he comes." I guess Annie fell asleep because the next day's strip, Annie is rushing out into the hallway in her pajamas trying to save Sandy. Sandy is trapped in a sack. The two servants are dragging it down the hall, trying to take it downstairs. Sandy inside is going, "Yip, yip, yip." Annie rushes to save Sandy, but Mrs. Warbucks blocks her pathway. Mrs. Warbucks says, "You shut up and go back to bed." Annie says, "But they've got my Sandy. They put him in that sack, and they're going to shoot him. Oh, Sandy!" Meanwhile, the servants have the sack with Sandy down at the bottom of the stairs near the front door. Sandy says, "Ow, ow." The one servant says, "A dirty business, I calls it." The other servant says, "If the master were here, this wouldn't happen. But if he catches us now, he'll kill us." Meanwhile, there's a click-click at the front door as somebody opens it from outside. It's Daddy Warbucks. He steps in. He looks angry. He says, "Hey, what's going on here? Come clean now. Talk fast." Sandy pokes his head out of the sack, goes, "Arf!" The one servant says, "Great glory, it's him." The other servant says, "It's the missus' orders, sir." Meanwhile, at the top of the stairs, Annie is trying to rush down the stairs, but Mrs. Warbucks is pulling her back. Annie is saying, "Daddy, it's Sandy. They're going to kill him." In the final panel, Daddy Warbucks is arguing with his wife. In the foreground, Annie is hugging Sandy. She says, "My Sandy!" Mrs. Warbucks says, "But he bit the Count on the leg. It's a miracle he didn't die of poison." The angry Daddy Warbucks says, "Yes, a miracle that Sandy didn't die of poison. So you'd have the pup shot for that, eh? A fine, tender-hearted, motherly old soul, ain't ya? Bah! Lucky I came home ahead of time." In the background, the two servants are running away as quickly as possible. The next day, Annie is making a pumpkin for Halloween while talking to her dog, Sandy. She says, "Gee whiskers, it's swell to have a real pal like you, Sandy. I always did love you lots, but I guess when you nearly lose somebody you love, it makes you love 'em more. When those two birds got that sack over your head, it looked like it was all over. If Daddy hadn't blown in, it would have been too. We sure owe him a heap, Sandy." Sandy says, "Arf." Annie continues, "He says we don't have to worry. Nothing like that'll ever happen around here again. Guess it won't either after what he told the missus. And those two birds that did what she told 'em are gone. They didn't even stop for their hats. When Daddy's mad, you'd think he was a cyclone or something, the way folks get out of sight." On Halloween night, Mrs. Warbucks is talking to the Count. She says, "What anyone can see in Halloween is more than I could ever fathom." The Count agrees. He says, "Vandalism, masks, a nonsensical practice to be sure. There is a big window in this room. A pumpkin-headed ghost shows up in the window, and it goes, 'Woo!' Mrs. Warbucks screams, 'Eee!' She knocks over a lamp and pushes the Count to tour into a pillar where a fishbowl falls on top of his head." In the next panel, the Count is lying on the ground in the middle of the big mess with the fishbowl upside down in his head, and he's very confused as to what just happened. Outside, Annie and Sandy are running away. She's got the Pumpkinhead ghost on a stick. She says, "Leapin' lizard, Sandy! Now we have gone and done it. We gotta ditch this thing or they'll pin it on us, sure." It's a bit of a light-hearted Halloween joke comic strip to end this rather serious week where the villains almost killed Sandy.